to Conversations with Frank Fabozzi. I'm Frank Fabozzi. My guest today is Sue Brake. In August, she was named chair of the board at Dragonfly Thinking, an Australian firm focused on using AI and complex systems thinking for scenario analysis, strategies, and investments. She was formerly the CIO at Australia's Future Fund, where she led a large team and managed a mandate involving over 220 billion Australian dollars in assets. Prior to that, she worked in roles including head of strategic advisory at Willis Towers and Watson, which those of you who aren't familiar, really in 2020 really pushed the concept of total portfolio analysis, which is something we'll get to later on. And she was also the senior investment strategist at NZ Superfund. Sue holds a Master of Arts in Psychology from the University of Canterbury, New Zealand, which I don't know if she covered behavioral finance in that course, if psychologists did that. She also has a Bachelor of Arts in English Literature and Psychology and a Bachelor's of Science in Mathematics and Computer Science at the University of Auckland. Okay. Sue, welcome, Sue.
Thank you. It's great to be here talking about all sorts of fascinating things with you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. You've held some of the most influential roles in institutional investing, from the CIO of the Future Fund, which you just left, and to chairing now, as I mentioned, Dragonfly Thinking. What key decisions or moments shaped your career path?
I'd love to say that it was all planned and, I had a master plan and mapped it all out. But I actually see my career in four, I'm going to say, movements. So the first was a degree, and then three, I talk about having three careers. A Master of Arts in Psychology in my first job was on a trading floor trading currencies. I didn't know that currencies were traded against the US dollars. I knew absolutely nothing. And the truth was, I walked in for the interview, phones were an accessory, and I just found the whole environment so incredibly exciting. And if I'm honest, it was also in the city where my boyfriend lived. So that was the first big decision, was to get into finance. The second career move came when I had turned into a 120-hour-a-week banking executive. I had my first child on maternity leave, instantly fell in love with her, and did not want to go back to that. There was this interesting thing called a sovereign wealth fund that had set up and wanted me to help with various things. So I constructed a role with them where I had no staff and no clients, and yet I could still keep developing my career by being an investment strategist. No clue. I didn't understand half of the conversations for the first 2 years, so that was the sort of second movement. Third movement, second career. And now I find myself, after, a blissful 20 years of knowing what I'm doing, back to trying to learn again. And it's hard when you're learning something that doesn't build on something you already know. I really do feel like I'm back in school. And that's this forward deployed engineer or this AI role where I'm chair of the board, but I'm also designing the investment product. And that requires me to be an AI context engineer. And I'd like to say I'm loving it, but I'm in too much pain currently to feel the love. I know I will, and I'm going to appreciate doing it, but I always find these transitions actually very difficult.
Well, how did your early academic background, as I mentioned, psychology, mathematics, computer science, and literature, inform the way you approach investment strategies today? I mean, obviously, you were building off of these things, and you were learning. And now, how did it influence you?
At the time, I didn't see the relevance. I went from, studying psychology and English literature to really leaning on the maths and computer science part of it, and I became very quantitative. I was a derivatives engineer, really, designing derivative products. And it wasn't until I got a bit more mature and a bit more senior in my roles that I understood what it means when you say it's a people business. And you can have the most beautiful model that you've built that you're incredibly excited about, but if you're not able to explain it to people in a way that resonates with them, then you're completely wasting your time. And it really is from that point I started to use more of the English literature in terms of communications and the psychology in terms of, inspiring, actually being sufficiently self-aware myself to earn the right to be a leader, but also to inspire followership. And then it was even later again when I started to think about that third movement, the investment management, and realized the extent to which our biases, really, a lot of the time we're not making good decisions. And it was quite shocking for me to realize that it wasn't about the maths and the quantitative things. It was about the simpler human things that would get in the way and in the end cost a lot of return. And that whole field of study is typically referred to as investment governance, but I found a real home in that space when I was at Willis Towers Watson.
Yeah, well, you're going to find it very interesting. I mean, you've probably already found it very interesting that the importance of being able to explain AI to clients. I mean, one of the criticisms of AI has been its black box nature. So I'm sure, your communication skills and taking those ideas is going to be a real challenge. What have you learned about leadership in high stakes, high uncertainty environments like sovereign wealth funds or strategic advisory panels?
I mean, firstly, I learned about myself that I throw myself into these terrifying environments, and do thrive and do love it. I like the uncertainty of it and the high stakes. But I think if I was to sum up what I've learned, it's the importance of two things that may seem to be diametrically opposed, but they're not, and that is boldness and humility. Because you need to act. You're being paid to take risk, so you can't be a risk manager and just, flip-flop around trying to avoid risk. You need to take risk to get return. So that's the boldness part. But the humility part, and it takes a few scars and knocks to sort of really understand this. You can never afford to believe your own investment case or your own media profile or media attention, because hubris is one of the biggest enemies of good decision making. And it's just so easy, and I have done it myself, to fall into that trap, because you're going fast, and before you know it, you're just way too confident. So it's a weird thing of being confident and not being confident simultaneously.
Well, you've been a strong advocate for the total portfolio approach, which is understandable given. Were you there in 2020 when Willis Towers Watson advocated that? I believe they were the advocate of
Yes,
the
yeah.
PPA
I was
approach.
there 2019 and worked with them on that. They had already been looking at it and called it the total portfolio approach. The funds that I'd been at didn't call it that, but it was a version of total portfolio approach. So I certainly encouraged them to keep doing that work. Not that they needed much encouragement from them. But yeah, total portfolio approach is a Willis Towers Watson name.
Well, it's been out there about 6 years, and we ran a special issue in the journal Portfolio Management talking about the future of asset management, and a couple of people reemphasized that approach. I do remember that CalPERS was thinking about doing that, and it seems to have gone out of favor at one time. Then it came back in. But what are the biggest misunderstandings about TPA in the institutional investing world, in your view?
I mean, there's lots of advantages of it, but I think they're well covered in the literature. From my perspective, because both New Zealand Super was an early adopter And Future Fund is often a poster child for the approach. So I've seen it in two guises up close. And when I was at Willis Towers Watson, I also helped two other organizations sort of develop a TPA multi-year kind of project. So I've seen it up close a few times, and it's fascinating. But I would say that the thing that there's almost a religious fervor that comes along with it around collaboration and being nice. That is not necessarily where the money is. So people kind of lose sight of where this premium is coming from and focus very much on a culture where people are collaborative and kind. And I really value kindness. I live by kindness as one of my own rules. But I think the thing you're looking for in those organizations is not necessarily kindness, but psychological safety. People need to be able to speak truth to power. And that's not necessarily a kind culture. So I think that's kind of overdone, and that's the really hard part of it. There are easier things you can do that will reap a good percentage of this so-called TPA premium. Well, I shouldn't say so-called, because I do believe in it. I do believe it has a premium.
How do you think sovereign wealth funds should adapt their strategies for an era of deglobalization and geopolitical volatility?
Yeah, I think our industry has followed other industries after COVID to think more about resilience and less about efficiency. And we've had our own version of that as people start thinking about risk in a slightly broader sense to include not only portfolio resilience, but organizational resilience. So I think there's been a few years now of organizations focusing on those things in some really interesting ways in which the traditional asset allocation model is being evolved, really, a lot towards TPA, but in other ways also to include the geopolitical risk, the green transition, and also the rollout of AI. And I think the key difference between asset owners and asset managers, an asset manager will focus on, trying to predict what the next geopolitical blocks will look like. Whereas an asset owner will go, I don't know how to do that. That's really hard. I'm going to lift it up a level and think about tipping points and feedback loops, and just ask a question at that level about what has changed. And what became obvious pretty quickly, and at Future Fund when we did this work actually back in 2020, um, it's trust. It's trust that has changed as we go through this. And that has all sorts of second and third order consequences that you can work through your portfolio from a beta perspective and a resilience perspective. I, I, I I think alpha is also incredibly rich in this environment for, skill-based alpha. So I'm not saying that that's not important, but that will be something that an asset owner will pay for, as opposed to, core to their mission of getting a great beta.
Well, what investment risks do you believe are most underappreciated by traditional asset allocation models today?
I mean, this is influenced by the psychology background, but I still think it's governance. And people roll their eyes when I want to talk to them about, making sure their mandate is really clear and they really have worked with their stakeholders to understand exactly what you need to be resilient to, what beliefs you have. And I think what I see most frequently is the old trap that I alluded to earlier, of just holding too tightly to your view or your beliefs, and not being open enough to alternative truths. If we could get that right, I think that would be the biggest premium across the industry on returns.
Okay. Well, what drew you to Dragonfly thinking after your tenure at the Future Fund? What excites you most about the challenge and the mission of the company?
Yeah, I was first introduced to this concept of dragonfly thinking a couple of years ago, and at a conference, and the opening speaker sort of laid out how to think about Dragonfly and why seeing things through multiple lenses is really important in the intelligence and policy setting community. And I just instantly saw the connections with the investment and decision making. And I wrote down every word that the speaker was saying, which I haven't done since, and I hadn't done for a very long time prior to that. It was just so relevant and it was exciting for me. I then developed a relationship with the founder and the speaker at that conference, Professor Anthea Roberts, and sort of sat alongside her as she started teaching AI how to think with multiple lenses, and thought it was great, but resisted getting involved with too much of my time because I thought I needed to not get bogged down in a startup at this stage of my career, which was just wrong. And it was when I got a mandate to do some work on future scenarios around the rollout of AI and geofragmentation and the green transition and the complex ways in which those three things that are all happening at the same time, how they interrelate with each other to give us future states of the world. And I was asked to do it what did they call it? A light version, which meant that they didn't want to pay, for many, many hours of my time. So I suggested that we had a look at what AI could do. I called Anthea. We spent 3 days. Well, she spent 3 days actually, being the engineer, and I then spent 15 or 20 hours curating the what came out of it, and it stunned me. It stunned me in terms of what is possible, and it was just immediately obvious that there is no future to consulting without having deep AI skills. And I'm controversial person. I think there's no future to investing either without having deep AI engineering skills. So when they offered me to join in the chair role, I very gratefully accepted.
And again, congratulations. You know what? Can you walk through how Dragonfly thinking combines complex systems thinking and AI to support better investment decisions?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with this concept of multiple perspectives, the Dragonfly eyes. And if you think about the multiple perspectives, they could be different ways to be really disciplined about looking at a problem. So think about SWOT analysis, where you make yourself think about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. There are another 50 of those that are on the platform that are disciplined ways of thinking about complex problems. But it also allows you to put on different personas. So you can also have a MAGA agent who will interact with you based on a MAGA set of beliefs and give you an interpretation of something that you're proposing. But there's a whole range of different personas. And what Dragonfly, the intelligence system, does, it allows you to build up the appropriate drivers of the issue that you want to study and the stakeholders. And then it'll help you identify the feedback loops and the tipping points, and then build and hold a systems map. One of the problems with working with systems maps is it's just too big for the human brain, whereas the AI can hold the whole thing in its internal consistency. And then you can run scenarios through the systems map, looking at each of those drivers and nodes and stakeholders and how they respond, and get a really rich scenario about how the future might play out. When I started playing with it and the work that I did with Anthea, just immediately made me start thinking about all the components of investing. And I have yet to think of a part of investing, call it a workflow, that we can't make better with AI. Having another intelligence just allows us to see human intelligence with more clarity, and less hubris. So it's less about teaching an AI to think like a human and more about taking the best parts of artificial intelligence and the best beautiful parts of human intelligence and combining them in a way to get a better outcome, to get a better investment decision. And so we're building out a series of investment tools that, are broader than just the scenario analysis.
Yeah, so if you were approaching a CIO about using AI and the models you developed, you're not someone who develops the model in terms of the coding, et cetera. You have groups that do that, right? A group that does that, or do you actually code in Python and write the models yourself?
The I'm going to speak in the future tense because I haven't got my training wheels off. But no, I do the context engineering with the AI, and sometimes it requires. And I've got a bit of coding in my background, but sometimes it requires a bit of vibe coding. But mostly, it's building agents, and it's a very special kind. And the way I liken it to is back in the 70s when in corporations, the word processor came out, and the executives were told they couldn't use the typist pool anymore. They needed to use this thing on their desk that they really didn't want to, because it's so much quicker and easier just to get the typist pool to type it up. Why are you making me learn this crazy thing? And I think that AI is similar because it's so iterative and so creative. It's not about raising a ticket and having someone at the back end do the programming for you. It's about interacting with it in a way as an expert with skill to create really quite remarkable agents.
Well, how do you see tools like scenario modeling evolving in the next decade, especially in light of AI advances and increasing systemic complexity?
Well, firstly, I see them as having an increasingly important role. They're so exciting, even without this complexity that we are all witnessing. I think that it would have been a very successful technological introduction, but with the complexity as well, it's a really strong imperative to use AI in our daily jobs. But I think about the second and third order impacts, which hurt my brain. But, I had a really clever professor who talked to me about the introduction of the electric engine replacing the coal-fired engines in the factories, and that it took 80 years from the filing of the patent for the electric engine, to it really flowing through into lots of other uses within the economy. And it requires you to get to this point where you go, well, hang on a tick, now that it's not that coal-fired engine, it's this other thing. We can actually do this completely differently. And that's what I see with this artificial intelligence, because we've built all these systems and workflows that cater to a human and our foibles and our strengths. And we don't need to do it that way anymore. We can completely re-engineer most of what I think most of what we do in the knowledge industries. So I think the second order is that we become coaches and editors, as opposed to doers. Our job is to get the best out of the AI for a lot of what we do. There are some things, obviously, they're going to remain humans, but a large part of what we do is about getting the best out of another resource rather than doing the analysis ourselves. And I think that has quite profound implications for education, for hiring, for training within organizations. I think it's really profound, what's going to happen over the next few years.
What skills or mindsets will define the next generation of world-class investors?
Yeah, so I think firstly, it's the ability to think about thinking. So the ability to raise it up a level and think in frameworks rather than the actual doing, so that you can get a wonderful combination of human and artificial intelligence to do a better job. As I say, it's no longer about coming up with an idea and raising a ticket for someone else to take care of the back end. I think we all need to interact with the AI ourselves.
Well, in your view, How should large funds balance the pressure for short-term performance against long-term system resilience and value creation? I'm sure that's a problem you faced all the time, man, as CIO.
Yes, and I think where I've landed on this is to be really clear about your mandate and your agreed values, because you can't build a more resilient portfolio, a more resilient organization if you're not clear about what resilience matters to your stakeholders. What's going to get the keys taken off you. So I think all that upfront work to get really, really clear on your mandate. So it's not a sort of a universal good that you're employing. You're working out what your mandate is and what your stakeholders expect from you, and then really making sure that you're doing both. And for many asset managers and some asset owners, short-term performance is really important. I've been blessed to work for 2 organizations that were truly long-term, but that not everyone has that luxury. So you have to work out how to balance those things through some sort of balanced scorecard where you're really clear with your stakeholders about, chasing that short-term return is going to cost you that long-term performance, and consciously making that decision so that nothing sideswipes you.
Last question, Sue. What's one piece of advice you would offer to someone, especially a woman, starting in investments or finance today?
I think the world is changing, but I think that's still the industry. But what I would say is there's a silver lining that comes with that extra work. You just get so much better because you're working so damn hard. While you need to consciously acknowledge the cost of that, which I didn't do for a very long time, I just kept thinking I was a superhero and that I could just keep working endlessly, extremely hard. So you need to consciously acknowledge the personal costs you're paying by working that hard. But I'm now at a point in my life, I've had such wonderful blessings in the last short while, and the CIO role at the Future Fund. And someone made a comment to me that I'm lucky, and I've realized that for the first time in my life, it's not luck, it's privilege, and I need to be grateful. I've now got to a point in my career, having worked really hard and made the most of it. I think luck will determine how long it takes, but it's hard work, and then the privilege of having a profile and a CV that proves that I can perform, and that then gives me privilege.
Well, Sue, thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and I wish you the best of luck in your new position and new venture. Is Dragon Fly Thinking how old is that firm? Or is
2 years, 2 years old,
2
very
years?
young.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good luck and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was very enjoyable.